Good evening, their respected chair, their HOD, their convener, Professor Arindam Chaudhary, and respected professors, respected associate professor and lecturers, and ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, organizers, Department of Commerce, and Sidaraman Lahari Mahavidyalaya, West Bengal, and Kishan Postgraduate College, UP, for providing me this gracious opportunity to be resource person to speak on SAARC countries and COVID-19 in this remarkable international webinar. Let me start my presentation. My title is COVID-19 and Economy in SAARC with a special reference to Nepal, observations, lessons and options. I will present in accordance with my outlines, context of COVID-19, objectives, model, data and methods, result and discussion, conclusion, lesson and options. I would like to start my presentation from great speaker Liu Zhen. We shall enhance cooperation in trade and investment within region, open up markets for each other, and promote trade and investment, facilitation and liberalization, and strengthen regional economic cooperation. I would like to remind you that South Asia had a beautiful dream of regionalism in 1980s as a reflection and good impression of successful story of ASEAN, NAFTA, and other regional organizations, and relevant to the second wave of globalization and liberalization in the world, to develop South Asia as economic power center in the world. It would be contextual and relevant to achieve rapid and higher economic growth rate, overall development and welfare at regional level. However, there was barriers of states' identity and political boundaries along with nationalism and fundamentalism, despite one-rooted homogeneity in culture, language, religion, and character of the people. In addition, the head of the state had a motivation of 3% world area and with 21% population and 3.67 trillion US dollars economy. It is not a joke, it is not a simple things. And they made big cause and big region. We can lead and we can change to be exist and to be competitive and attractive in the world. And in this situation, they advocated one region for collectivism in economic cooperation for overall development of region. And then after, what would happen? With optimism, different level of talks and meetings happen at bilateral and multilateral level. Ultimately, in 1985, the dream was materialized as a SAARC, as a one region, or as one South Asia, and with alignment of political identities and loyalties from the state of the region, with the dream of free flow of goods, services, people, and investment, technology, and other resources. For what? For coordinating social, economic, for political activities on region. And ultimately, the dream, initiated regional security, peace, development and welfare. I would like to present my result in this talk. First result is related to COVID scenario. Based on COVID train, COVID ratio and its graph. When we observe COVID train, we can find out positive and inclining trend in Nepal. On September 30, its case reached at 77,870 with 1,000 per day new case registered. And when we observe, it started from 23rd May to September 30. In recently per day 4,000 new cases. But when we observe the lockdown, to control and response COVID-19 new cases of the COVID-19, government has initiated two lockdown measures. One started from March 23 to the July 21st, and second lockdown initiated from August 16 to September 7. But when we observe the lockdown first, we can easily find out the mismatch situation. Our first case was registered on 23rd May, but we started our lockdown from 23rd May before 2 months ago. And in this situation, when we observe the positively inclining trend of COVID-19 cases, lockdown was not effective much more to respond to the lockdown cases. But interestingly, new cases and deaths were found increasing along with the increasing capacity of the recovery rates also, and that recovery rate was found more than 70%, and that is a very interesting and impressive issue to us. And what happened in the case of the sex between the male and female? COVID-19 affected more on male and than female. Maybe female has not much more mobility than male. But when we observe the recovery, it makes shock. We have some more than 70% recovery rate. Out of that, 91.5% male has a recovery, but in the case of the female, it's the less 8.5%. And in comparison with new cases, females rate is less, but in the case of the males, rate is higher than new cases, COVID cases. And what about the effects on age? We have categorized into the two groups. One is below 50, another is the above 50 years. And in this situation, what will happen? COVID-19 affected both age groups, but when we observe the recovery rate, below 50 years age group has a more recovery rate than above 50 years. And when we observe the death rate, below 50 years age group has less, but the above 50 years age group has more death rates, and it shows us the more vulnerability to the old age group, above 50 years groups. And all of you know about Nepal has been experimented infant federal structure by dividing for 7 provinces. And if you observe the 7 provinces in the COVID cases, we can find out the province 2 is a is is highly vulnerable than the other provinces, but it is followed by province 3, province 5, province 7, and then after province 1 and 4. But when we observe the allocation of our PCR test, its intensity or the focused more on province 3, where all the high elite and powerful people live, or the in the Kathmandu valley. But in the case of the province 1, 2 and 4, 5, 6 and 7, we found the misallocation of PCR test. And in this situation, if we come to compare the two periods scenario, first scenario we found province 2 is a most vulnerable province, and then after it is followed by the province 5 and 6. But if we observe the test, we get the over allocation on province 3rd. But if you observe the first vulnerable receives 4th rank, and we can find out the mismatch and over allocation of PCR test. But in September we try to observe the scenario, what is the change, and province 2 consistently ranked at the first vulnerable, but the province 3 follows it and province 5 follows it. And but if you observe here, we can also get it the over allocation and misallocation of PCR test in. But it means what? Government has not improved such types the issues, such types the problems, and based on the vulnerability rank. And this is the very, and it also promotes the COVID-19 cases. And what are the reasons behind it? What are the drivers? In Nepal, remittance has contributed 28% in our in GDP, and if we observe the foreign employment, we can easily find out 4.3 million are inactive in except India abroad, and 8.3 million people inactive in India. And in this situation, foreign employment market dominates or the leads to our Nepalese labor market. And in the post COVID-19, what happened? All labor try to return in Nepal, and in this situation they also imported COVID-19 cases in Nepal, and then they transfer to family and society and the nation. And in this situation, what will happen? At the June and July, it just affected 49 districts of Nepal. That is the 63% of 77 districts. But after 2 months, all districts are affected by COVID-19. And then after on September, Kathmandu Valley is a hotspot, is found hotspot of the COVID-19, and with 1,000 new cases per day. And whatever recommended by the WHO, Nepal has initiated anti-COVID-19 measures, aggressive testing campaign, lockdown, using sanitizer and mask, social distancing. But when we observe the all this, what we found, on the basis of that, we found unnecessary and unproductive lockdown imposed before 2 months in the absence of any cases, and that decision is criticized by all the sector. Another part is the growth of COVID-19 cases during lockdown has been expanding, and means lockdown has favor to the growth of the COVID-19. Besides it, there are the some few issues noted and they are locked down as a holistic measure imposed not on time, ineffective surveillance to human movement in the Indo-Nepal open border. Third one is observation is not proper management of testing, examination in the Indo-Nepal border when India opened transportation to return Nepalese labor from India to Nepal, and no proper isolation and quarantine, and no proper record and tracking. And fifth one is the no priority on emergency health measure, institution and phone on time, giving responsibility to the local government despite the need to central government's emergency institutional move. And when we talk about, when we observe the sanitizer, we found it is not properly maintained, not only in the private sector but also in the government sector, and it is also the big issue, big cause behind the growth of COVID-19. and while at last social distancing is not properly followed at the local level, at the government level, and that factor also plays important role or the push of the growth of COVID-19 cases. I would like to share second group of the findings, and in this case you know what is the effects of the COVID-19 and lockdown on social, economic and political sector. But I would like to say growing COVID-19 pandemic has made vulnerable to health sector of Nepal and the health of the people. And what will happen, and then government has initiated to respond COVID-19 cases and by using lockdown measure. And then after, what will happen, the policy shock forcefully imposed to all economic sector by its major concern was to close down economic activities including firms, industries, business and everything sector. And in this situation it means what? It means zero mobility, zero production, zero consumption and zero economic activities. And naturally it was the cause of the output loss, potential output loss, along with the loss of employment and loss of other different types of the activities. In Nepalese economy, there are the four major sectors: agriculture, industry, service and trade, and including sub-sectors: fishery, mines, electric, gas, water, construction, wholesale and retailer, transportation and communication, financial sector, real estate, public administration, education and health. All sectors have lost record in terms of output, income and employment. And when we calculate, when we sum based on the GDP contribution, we found the per day 10 billion rupees loss. And it is not a simple, please remember. And similarly, it also indicates our slowdown, forcefully slowdown of the economic activities towards recession and depression. And it is validated by the government's reports. Except the agriculture, in the pre-COVID, we can find out the all sectors had performed better. But in post-COVID, except agriculture, all sectors have performed negatively. And out of this sector, hotel and restaurant are most vulnerable than other sectors, and it is followed by transport and communication with minus 13.25, trade with minus 7.16, industry minus 6.29, government service minus 2.16. And in this way it shows us or leads us economic recession and towards the depression. In economic recession and depression, we can get the close down or the bankruptcy cases, and such types the cases emerge in Nepal also. In Kathmandu, approximately 700 shops, small, micro level and the medium level enterprises closed down. Then after, in recently, two beautiful hotels in Viratnagar are closed down. And when we observe the financial market, you know there is a problem of no demand for new loan, although the bank has liquidity. And in this way, we can reach a conclusion of recession. And what is the consequences on economic growth? And we found, you know, economic growth is a good indicator of GDP performance, and GDP depends on the output contribution of all economic sector including agriculture, industry, trade and service sector. And in this situation, above figures shows us the huge output loss per day along with employment loss and income loss. Its negative implication can be found on 2019 and 2020 also. In last three consecutive years, we have recorded more than 6% economic growth rate, and Nepal was successful to attract foreign investor and other different types of the business communities to invest in Nepal. But unfortunately, due to the COVID in 2019, economic growth rate was 2.5%, but in 2020 there is a degrowth of Nepal 0.1. IMF has predicted less degrowth of the 3%, but we expect the 0.1%. Like as the other developed countries, USA, UK, India, and other countries, except the China. That is the scenario. It also indicates the slowdown of Nepal's economy. And the third consequences can be found, and it relates to the loss of employment. And if you observe the employment structure, it is mostly informal and mostly in the agriculture sector, and approximately 67% people directly and indirectly engage in agriculture sector. But when we observe the urban and rural area, and in the pre-COVID, we can easily find out the 34.2% people employment to population ratio and 38.5 labor force participation rate, and unemployment rate was only 11.4%. But after COVID, what happened? The close down economic activities caused the loss of 7.6 million population's job, and that is the equivalent to the 16.4%. And what happened in this situation? Employment to population ratio found 17.8% declined, and the labor force participation rate declined 22.1, and unemployment rate increased 27.8%. And when we observe its effects by sex, we can easily find out the growth of the unemployment has negative implication more on the urban area than rural area, and more male than female. But what will happen? Females job loss means, and its negative implication goes on women's discrimination and empowerment, and the more in urban than in rural areas. And based on such consequences, we can conclude and we can predict massive youth unemployment will be a big threat to Nepal's economy. And that is validated by the government reports, and it's reports 31% employment loss. And let's imagine that is what will happen. Its effects at multi-layer and multiple level. And in addition, Another consequence, consequence is the fourth consequence is related to the foreign employment. Like as the domestic employment market, we have the important, employment market is the foreign employment, and where, approximately 4.3 million population people, engage in abroad, except India, and 8.0 million engage in India. And let's think about and let's imagine, and almost, if you talk about India, if you talk about Saudi Arabia, USA, or Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, Malaysia, all countries are affected by the COVID-19, and their economy, are found slow down. And in this situation, no new job demand for foreign employment, foreign labor. And in this situation, Nepalese labor has only one option to return in Nepal, and that is a negative consequences. And if they stay in these countries, job is available, but its wage level may be lower than their expectation, and it may be the risk to the Nepalese labor. In this situation, it is expected that 2 million labor will return in Nepal, and that IMF predicts 23% remittance will be potential loss, and its negative consequences may be multiple and multi-layer, not only at the macro level but also at the micro level, or including household level. And above, based on these information and the facts, we found except agriculture and all economic sectors are slowdown and contraction, of economic growth and employment output and income of Nepal. And all these indicators have led economic recession towards depression, and maybe in the SAARC, if we believe on IMF's prediction. And third result is related to the what is the quantification or the cost of the COVID-19, and we can easily find out Nepal is a 38.32 billions, 32 billions economy, and this small economy has found big loss in production, and it's approximately 16.8 billion rupees, and then after revenue loss was 272 billion, cost of health recovery was 2.88, health investment was 30. In all together, we we can get it 54.68 billion, and that is not a small. It approximates 41.6% of total GDP, and if you compare with the last year's budget, and it is equivalent, means that loss is equal to the 1 year budget of the country. And it means what? It means huge GDP loss, and leads to the significant contraction towards the negative 0.1% economic growth rate. And question is what is the effects of the COVID-19 and then lockdown in economic cost of economy. And by using this simple multiple regression, we found the economic loss is explanatory with 0.86, more than COVID-19's effect, 0.40. It shows us the lockdown's effect is more than COVID-19. And in this situation, in Nepalese economy, there is a question of resilience, issues of market, production, distribution, and our imperfect economic system. And in this, it means lockdown is more prevalent than the COVID-19. Based on that, we found the unexpected huge output loss to the economy of Nepal led to negative economic growth rate, and lockdown's effect is more than COVID-19 in GDP. These second consequences have also the another level of the consequences at macro and micro level, and the effects of the COVID-19 and lockdown loss at macro and micro level. And let's see what will happen. Just like the, if you talk about the remittance contributed 28% in GDP in 2019 and 2018, and it contributed 60% in exchange rate, and it provided the capacity 7 months to import the merchandise, goods and services. But after the, in the post-COVID, what happened? Our GDP ratio, GDP contribution will be, or the would be, 18%, and its effect can be found in the exchange rate of 39%, and months 4.5 55%, and in 4 months. And in this situation, what will happen? Its negative implication can be found remittance size and balance of payment. And in this situation, altogether we can find out the that consequences disturb or the interrupt macroeconomic stability of the country, and it will be the big problem to the country. And when we talk about the budgetary policy and the fiscal health and budget revenue and budget deficit and fiscal deficit, we can find out the, yes, the COVID-19 has created big vibration of instability. And in this way, if you observe the budget, G revenue and GDP ratio was 25%, and out of that, indirect tax share 80%, direct tax 20%, and it just cover or the supported the one our regular expenditure. And if we observe the during the lockdown and COVID period, we can easily find out 200 billion rupees loss leading in our revenue. And it means what? It leads to the wider budget deficit and fiscal deficit. And if we believe on the Ministry of Finance, 40 billion rupees expenditure per month and 15 billion rupees revenue per month. Look, let's think about it. And its negative consequences can be found in terms of the growth of expenditure, demand pressure to revenue mobilization. Second consequences, review of the budget and explore debt for regular expenditure or new currency printing. And consequence 3 is failure budget of federal government and the province government. And in this situation, it pressurizes and leads to think and formulate budgetary policy towards self-reliant economy for escaping dependent and deficit trap. Another effects consequence can be found on the poverty growth. And if you observe the income distribution and poverty level in pre-COVID-19, we can easily find out we had four income groups: upper class, middle class, and vulnerable group and poor group. If we observe the vulnerable group, its share was 45%, and poor group was 31%. But in COVID, in the post-COVID, you can easily find out the vulnerable group transform to the poor groups. With the it indicates the poverty level has been increasing more than before. And in this situation, if you observe the contribution of the remittance and the labor in pre-COVID-19, it contributed 52%, and remittance contributed 27% in household income. But after the COVID, what happened? 35.4% labor income, 20.76%. In this situation, degrowth of the labor income with 17%, remittance income with 7.76%, push up or the contributed to more poverty, and it will be 31.6%, and it means massive poverty, hunger, vulnerability, and in future it will be the big threat, and also transforming social, economic, and political level at rural and urban area. And its severity can be found in Nepal. There is some cases are recorded due to the hunger during the lockdown period, people suicided. Not only there were the many cases we have, and it shows us the severity effects of lockdown and COVID-19. Similarly, during the lockdown, its negative consequences can be found on domestic growth of the domestic violence against women, children, and along with the suicide cases, and its cost is huge to the not only the family but also the society and nation. And based on the all this information, I would like to share the summarize of the findings in economic slowdown, loss of employment, output income may increase, massive poverty and hunger. All hunger cause the growth of social crimes including suicide, domestic violence, and lockdown has increased domestic violence and other social crimes, particularly against female. Based on above findings, I would like to conclude here. Uh, my first conclusion is that COVID-19 is infectious disease infecting 34.1 million population and killing 1 million population in 215 countries of the world, where its intensity is extremely more in G20 countries with higher transmission rate. IMF expected $3 trillion loss with 3% degrowth. COVID-19 pandemic is a big threat to the world. My second conclusion, similar scenario is found in South Asia where its rate is slow and gradual, but its intensity occurs mainly four countries of SAARC: India, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Nepal. Out of 8 SAARC countries, India is an epicenter of COVID-19 based on our second rank in the COVID-19 in the world dashboard. And fourth conclusion, in SAARC, Nepal ranks at 47th in 250 countries of the world. COVID-19 is a big threat to Nepal with respect to the growth of COVID-19 cases with 1,000 new cases per day. Fourth conclusion is sector economy of Nepal is including industry, trade, transportation, service and hotels contracted except agriculture due to the lockdown and COVID. Its consequences are 30% loss of employment, 40% loss of income and output, and negative 0.1% economic growth rate. The economy is being recession towards depression. And fifth one is fear is the growth of macroeconomic instability, massive hunger and social crimes. And sixth one is then its further shock will instability and arrogant to the government policy, behavior and activities. Its consequences will be public movements, political order and disorder, and political equilibrium and discipline will emerge. And despite the exogenous shock, Nepal should find crisis management at endogenous level by pushed up demand side of the market with direct money transfer and supply side with fiscal and monetary stimulus package 3 years, survival, stability and stimulus of the production sector along with inclusive growth. The state should play leading role to strengthen production and market along healthcare system. If not, all budgetary policy will be failure. Its result will be political change as a way forward. Time to come to think about economic system, its philosophy and political structure and political economy. And based on the conclusion and findings, I found the lesson learned and options. Natural and unnatural disaster suddenly happens with risk, loss and vulnerability in the world. Second is preparation and resilience are must to save lives, socio-economy and politics of the country. Individual country cannot do much more in the resource constraint. Therefore, we need collectivism as alternative for regional cooperation. And last one is it makes relevant to SAARC not only at present but also at future because of climate change and other threats. Thank you.